Hello and welcome to the Association for Coaching podcast. My name is Rob Lawrence and I'm your host for this Boost Your Coaching Business series. Today I have with me someone who has inspired many coaches to be themselves through their own coaching and marketing, and has been somebody who helps coaches to think about their positioning and their presentation into the wider world by being themselves. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Kim Arnold. Kim, welcome.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So from the bits I know, Kim, you've got a fascinating backstory. My introduction to the Association for Coaching and my introduction to you was the first Association for Coaching live event that I went to in London here in the UK many moons ago now. And ever since then, you've taught principles that I've put into my own coaching business and seen results from. But I'm eager to know, has marketing been something that you've always wanted to do? Is it something that you've always had an intuition, if you like? Does it come naturally to you? And what's your backstory there?
Good, juicy first question. Well, for me, I was thinking about this. It's always been about words for me. I studied languages at university. I did German and Russian. I lived in Russia for a year and managed to do some amazing things living with Russian families. I travelled, hiked around Siberia and did some really crazy stuff. And for me, it was about the love of language and really understanding how the words that we choose can affect people and their behavior and how we engage with people, how we interact with them. And so that was my starting point. But when I left university, I had no clue really what I could do with that. At the time, if you wanted to do, this is the late 90s, showing my age now, if you wanted to do something with Russian, then there weren't that many options. It was, work for an oil company or become a sort of bilingual PA. And I didn't really fancy either of those. But eventually I did end up in the marketing team of a German bank. And I thought, well, I can use my German. This was sort of at the time of lots of big marketing budgets. So I was thrown into the deep end of organising huge events. We, used to get Elton John along to join these corporate events that we organised, and it was all helicopters and designer handbags, and it was a lot of fun. But as it went along, I realised that actually the glamour was fun, don't get me wrong, but what I really wanted to keep coming back to was the idea of words and how we use them. So I ended up moving more into PR and communications, ended up having a sort of big global team, worked for an American corporation, had people all over the world. So I got the chance to work with such a wide range of people, and I loved seeing the ways in which we can use language to connect with people, and marketing was part of that, but for me it was much bigger. And then eventually this turned into my own business, but I'll come back to that in a moment, I'm sure. It's something that I think I turned something I loved into a career. I didn't really start with the career. I let it sort of flow a little bit more organically. But it's something that's been within me, yeah, for sure.
You've turned this into your own business now. I'm sure quite a non-linear journey as it is for many of us, with all sorts of highs,
yes.
with lots of highs and lows. And we'll get into some of the details, I'm sure. But what would you say have been some of the highlights? What have been some of the major turning points for you evolving the business that you have now and getting it to that point?
Oh, I mean, non-linear is definitely the right word for it. My business has evolved in it's been 10 years now, into so many different evolutions of itself. And I think when I started out, I didn't really know what kind of business I wanted, but I knew what I wanted it to do. And that at the time was, I had 2 young children. I couldn't fly around the world anymore. I wanted to be at home more. One of my children had some additional needs, and I needed time, but I also needed money. So I sort of built a business around those two things. What can I do that brings me in a decent income, but that allows me to be at home as much as possible? And the kind of work that I took on sort of evolved from that. But I did some really interesting things right at the beginning. So I started off as a copywriter. Thought that was what I wanted to do because I love language, I love writing. So I did some amazing things like I wrote an advert. The very first job I got was writing an advert about laser hair removal for the Peter Andre fan magazine. Peter Andre, for those of the people who aren't in the UK, he's he's actually an Australian sort of D-list singer. So this was quite an interesting job. And then I moved out of the copywriting and I took on some contract roles as a sort of foray into my own business. And one of those actually took me to working alongside Al Gore, which was quite the former US vice president, which was an amazing role that sort of happened out of nowhere. And I remember at the time when I was evaluating it, I was thinking, can I manage to do this between the hours of 10 and 3, which was in between school drop off and pick up? And is this even possible? This is insane. And my husband rightly sort of sat me down and said, Kim, are you insane? You have to do this job. I have to take on this contract. So it's definitely been a big evolution, done some really amazing things. Every year there's something new and something different in my business that delights me. If it's working with a particular client, seeing their evolution, particularly my one-on-one clients, when they start off being, I know we'll talk about this in a minute, but when they start off being super scared of marketing and then you just see them grow and spread their wings, that's a wonderful thing. So for me, it's about getting pleasure on so many different levels of my business. It's about the personal satisfaction from the work that I do. It's about how I help people and seeing their pleasure, but it's also about how I balance that with the rest of my life. And I'm not saying it's always easy, but there's certainly a huge amount of benefits as well.
Yeah, I'm sure our listener and many coaches can relate with your story there and that desire as well. I know many coaches, they almost have a coaching business by design that's around their lifestyle, and they obviously want to make meaning in the world as you do, but it's about having some important personal parameters too, in terms of what kind of business, if I'm going to run my own business, what kind of business do I want to run? And how do I want my work to fit into my life? Or how do I want my coaching to fit into my life?
And I think that's okay. I think a lot of coaches that I see, and well, not just coaches, a lot of business owners, they get very caught up in their why. So they've been told, they've read the Simon Sinek book, and I have to have this deep why about why I want to start this business. Is it, I want to bring world peace, or I want to transform the lives of women? But actually, for most of us, we know we want to help people broadly, but we have to be practical as well. So I think your why at your beginning, you're totally allowed to have a more selfish why for a business that fits around your life. I give everyone permission to do that, because I think it's really important to make that balance.
That's great, Kim. That brings me on to something I wanted to bring up with you today in the conversation. You use this term, ultimate self-expression. I'm eager to learn more about what that means to you, and in the context of what you were kindly sharing there about a business that has meaning for us but feels like ourselves.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing when I see my clients just be themselves in their business, because it's a journey that I've been on myself. And I wasn't there 10 years ago. I tell you, my first website was a very tasteful farrow and ball kind of grey-green colour. And it was very nice and corporate and really bland, incredibly bland. And it wouldn't offend anyone, but, it wouldn't excite anyone either. And what I've learnt myself over the years is that the more personality, the more of myself I put into my business, the better response I get. And that's what I try and help my clients do. And there's one of my clients who always, her story just always brings a smile to my face, because she came out of the corporate world, as a lot of coaches do. And the way that she wrote, the way that she presented herself was very corporate, very sort of stiff and buttoned up, and very jargony language. I'm pleased to leverage the solutions that we can utilize, all this stuff. But when you met her in person, oh my goodness, such a vibrant woman, really funny, wicked sense of humor, and so smart. And so we were digging into this. I was like, look, we need to get more of your personality out. So tell me a bit more about yourself. What do you like doing at the weekends? And it turns out she used to love clubbing, and she had a real penchant for Vivienne Westwood clothes and shoes. And she said, in fact, I'm wearing some at the moment. We were on Zoom, and she puts her feet up on the table, and there are these amazing shoes, red glitter shoes, and she's just wearing them on like a Tuesday afternoon. That's just her thing. So after that, I said, right, we want more Westwood. So every time she wrote something or put a presentation together, and she'd send it over to me, and we'd have this sort of Westwood-ometer to figure out how much personality she was putting into her business. And the more we ramped up the Westwood factor, the more of herself she was putting in, the better response she got from clients. So they felt that they were really interacting with her, even if they weren't in the room with her. So for me, it's about getting that consistency between, if someone meets me in person, or they read my newsletter, or they read a LinkedIn post that I've put, it's all the same voice. It's that same person. It's not the corporate version on paper and then the sort of warm and fuzzy version in real life. And when you can marry those two pieces of yourself, your business self and your true self, it's a brilliant thing. And the copywriter Laura Belgrave, she said, it's about being paid for being you. And doesn't that sound great? But I know it is quite hard when we've come out of the corporate world. We've actually felt that we couldn't be ourselves for a long time. I know that certainly that was the case for me. When I was working in larger corporations, I had to sort of tone myself down a bit. But when we do run our own businesses, actually, our brand is our personality. So we need to make the most of it.
Some great stuff in there, Kim. What do you feel it is that holds many coaches back when it comes to being themselves in business like that? You mentioned coming out of the corporate world. My own experience has been, I think I was kind of somewhat institutionalized, if you like. And when I came out, I kind of felt there's a certain way of doing things. There's a certain way you present yourself. There's a certain way you communicate in business. And that was my business training. So for me, I had to undo quite a lot of that stuff. But from the experience that you have working with many coaches, what do you feel it is that's holding them back from being themselves in business?
Great question. I think there are two challenges. I think the first is articulating their message. So this is the biggest stumbling block that I find. It's when I work with coaches on my one-to-one program, this is normally where we start, because they haven't spent enough time digging down, or haven't often this is the first time that they're having to do marketing or branding. So they're not digging down deeply enough into their audience and into their own brand. So it's like building a house on shaky foundations. If you haven't got that foundation laid of your messaging so that you're really confident about what it is that you offer, why are you different? Why should people listen to you? Why should they trust you? What can you do that other people can't do? If you're not clear on all of this stuff, then it's very hard to get yourself out there. So that kind of message, getting that messaging sorted is really important, and something I really encourage coaches to focus on before they do their marketing. Because if you don't get that right, you don't have the confidence to go out to market. I see it, I always liken it to going to a party and wearing the wrong outfit. If everyone else is looking all fabulous in their evening wear, and you've turned up in your scruffy jeans and your gardening shoes, you're not going to feel sparkly and vivacious and want to go out there and talk to people. So we've got to get the confidence that comes through strong messaging and visual identity and branding and all that good stuff. So that's the first thing. The second thing I hear all the time is, I don't want to be seen as pushy. Oh, what will people think? I don't want to bother them. I don't want to look like a show off. People don't want to hear what I've got to say. So there are so many fears built up, particularly women, I would say, lots and lots of imposter syndrome there, but also men. And I think it's particularly true when we're working in a people business like coaching. that somehow there's a conflict between sales and marketing, which they see as sort of pushy and grubby and a bit underhand and, like the sort of used car salesman. A conflict between that kind of grubbiness of selling yourself and the purity, as it were, of helping people through your coaching. So these two things really clash. And if we don't address this very clearly early on, there can be real problems. So my answer to this is that marketing really is just about showing people how you can help. And selling is about helping people. And you can't help people if they don't know you exist. So pushy sales is just bad sales. Underhand techniques, just bad sales. Like there are bad coaches out there as well. Good marketing people, good salespeople just want to help. They're genuinely curious about other people and they make their lives easier. We all love it when we buy something that helps us in our lives. I remember going to I hate buying jeans. It's like one of my bugbears, as it is, I think, for a lot of women. They never fit. You never know what you're getting. It's a minefield. And I remember going to the department store a few years ago, and there was the most amazing woman who knew the shop assistant, and she knew the full stock of all the jeans in the store. There were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pairs of different jeans, different brands, different sizes. And she looked at me and she said, right, you need this one, this one, this one, or this one. And she pulled out 4 pairs. And they all looked amazing. And they were the most expensive jeans in the shop. And do you know what? I did not care. I was delighted that finally an expert had helped me cut through all of the pain to get to where I wanted to go. And I was happy and willing to pay for that. She'd clearly done a brilliant sales job on me. She'd upsold me the most expensive jeans in the shop, but I loved it. So actually, it's a myth that everyone hates being sold to. They hate being sold to badly. So if we do it in a way that is authentic, we're genuinely curious about people, and we show how we can help them, then hopefully everyone listening to this will see that there actually isn't a conflict between marketing yourself and coaching. They can sit really happily alongside each other.
That's fascinating, Kim. I love that story too there about the jeans. And actually, it's not just women. I can share that as well. Finding the right jeans is it can be quite a job. That's fascinating, Kim. It's really insightful, as are many of your musings and your teachings. What I was hearing there then, it's actually about not doing more. It's sometimes about doing less, but doing yourself in the right way, so to speak. Getting clear on who that is. Not so much the why. That was refreshing to hear earlier. You were mentioning that people get fixated, and I recognise this in the work that I do. I realise that a lot of people get really stuck in that place about trying to figure out what their why is, rather than what I was hearing there, Kim, is more about who they are and what they care about.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think sometimes your why is actually not your client's why. So if your mission is to align your business with your career as a yoga teacher, to bring a kind of spiritual hold to your life, well, that's really nice for you, but why should your clients care about it? So actually, they're interested in themselves. They're not really interested in you. If your why is the same as their why, so for example, if you were a coach who works with charities, and then you talk about altruism, then that's going to connect really well. But if you're a coach who's talking about a lot of spiritual stuff, and you're working with an investment bank who just wants to grow their revenues, they're not a good match. So we do need to make sure that we articulate who we are, but also on a really basic level, what it is that we can offer and how we can help. And those, for me, are much more of a priority than the why.
Yeah, got it. So this is about being clear on the offer and articulating that and focusing on that, rather than some of the deeper, more detailed other stuff. actually telling your story as you go, which is something I'd like to talk to you about, because I see you doing this very well, and I know you're an inspiration to many in terms of sharing the behind the scenes. Just the other day I saw a social media clip of where you were setting up your video for your new book launch, which we'll talk about shortly. But it's sort of sharing that side of your life as well, in the context of who you are and what it is that you offer. Could you talk to me a little bit more about that?
It's a really interesting one, and it's one that scares a lot of people, I think, to sort of bring their whole selves. I think the pandemic has actually accelerated that process for many of us. It's been a real leveler that actually we've seen inside everyone's bedrooms, often literally. We've seen bedrooms and bed heads in the mornings with crazy hair, and we've seen much more of that personal side of people's lives. And there is increasingly a thirst to see that, and almost an expectation to see that. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to lay everything bare. There is certainly, my husband does not like me talking about him, although he does make it into my newsletters occasionally with his permission. So there's certain parts of my life that I like to keep private, but showing, as you mentioned, kind of some of the behind the scenes stuff, that the video for my book was shot with perched on piles of books with makeshift studios in my kids' bedrooms. It can bring more of your story to the table. And when we are running our own businesses, particularly when we're a one woman or one man band, it helps people get to know us before they've met us, and it helps establish a bit of trust too if they know a bit more about us. So I think it's a journey. I wouldn't say to people, don't feel that you have to, some of those posts on social media, this is my most vulnerable post yet, and then they sort of go into a particular topic. That's great for some people who want to do that. Don't feel that you have to do that. But perhaps it's just about sharing some stories that might be personal, but you can put a business twist on them. Just letting your personality shine a bit more. Certainly in my experience, the more I do that, the closer a connection you can get with your audience.
I love what you said there about letting your personality shine. That's something I certainly see you do. Coming back to an earlier point you mentioned in that context, something I know you talk a lot about, and you mentioned it earlier, is consistency. And I know, again, from a marketing point of view, is something I see a lot of folks, particularly coaches, struggle with, is having that consistency. What are your secrets there in terms of doing the stuff that you were just talking about there, but in a consistent way, and making those opportunities to share the aspects of our lives and our business that we want to in an easy and consistent way?
Oh, it's a challenge. And I feel it in my business. How do you balance client work with marketing and your branding? And it's very difficult to get that balance right. I think the main thing to remember is that little and often is much better than stop start. So what a lot of coaches do is, they might start the year well. January is like, woo, I'm going to do marketing this year. This is going to be my year. And they get their plan together and they start doing it. And then suddenly the work comes in and all the marketing just falls away because they fill their schedules so full of coaching work because it's great. We don't want to say no to the work. And then they finish that sort of round of work or piece of work, or those clients come to the end of their sort of blocks, and then it's tumbleweed. And then they go, oh, right, now I better do some marketing. But of course, it takes time for that marketing to take effect, normally 3 to 6 months. So we need to stop with this yo-yo marketing, as I call it, up and down, up and down. We are far better doing very, very small amounts of marketing regularly. So sometimes with my clients, life happens. Kids get sick. We have a pandemic. We have to homeschool, care for parents, whatever. Take it back to that tiniest thing that you can keep doing each week. So it might be emailing 3 people to say, let's have a Zoom catch up, or hopefully a coffee. Or it might just be connecting with a couple of people on LinkedIn and commenting on their posts, but little and often is the best way. And just keep coming back to your voice. Does it sound like me? I talk about the alien abduction test. This is from the same copywriter, Laura Belgrave. She's fantastic. And she always says, if you were to read what you've written out loud to a friend, would they think that it's you, or that an alien had sort of is inhabiting your body because you sound so stiff and robotic and a little bit like an alien? So just little and often, and letting our personality shine through. And you'll be amazed at what a difference you can make with consistent marketing. It's not size that matters, it's consistency.
Something you revealed just then I thought was really interesting is that you were talking about marketing in a way there which sounded more, if I can frame it this way, internal rather than external. So when I think about marketing, I'm thinking about outbound. I'm thinking about getting out there, putting something out into the wider world. Whereas the clues you were giving me then a moment ago, actually sending out 3 emails to people directly is also a form of marketing as well. Could you talk a little bit more about that more strategic side of marketing and the tactical side of marketing and how that works in your world in terms of some of the principles behind what marketing is, perhaps?
Oh, that's a good, juicy question. We tend to overlook what is under our nose. And a lot of coaches have grand plans to do podcasts or to do videos or to do events, and they're neglecting the sort of low-hanging fruit that's under their nose. And that's typically their network. It's a little bit like if you are organising a party and you're inviting a whole load of strangers, but you've forgotten your friends and family. And those are the ones who are more likely to come to your party. So we need to think about how we engage the people who are already receptive to us. So that might be existing clients. How do we sell more to them? Clients that we've worked with previously who've lapsed for a while. So how do we do all of that well? Because the best money comes from existing clients. These are the people who know us, they like us, they trust us already. So we can often sort of throw a lot of marketing time and effort at strangers when we're missing the stuff that's under our nose. So that's one of the biggest strategic mistakes I see people make. And often it's quite a relief when I tell them this. They go, oh, so you mean I don't have to do all of that huge stuff? And it's like, well, that would be great if you can fit that in as well, or work up to that. But start small, start with what you know. Sending emails out to a few lapsed clients to reconnect with them is probably going to lead faster to more work than some of these longer plays. So you need the sort of shorter term strategies as well as those longer term ones that will ultimately increase your network as well. That balance.
That's fascinating. That's really insightful. So thanks for that, Kim. You mentioned mistakes there. I was just curious as to what other mistakes you see, not just coaches, but people making in their marketing. You must see loads on a daily basis, I imagine, Kim, from your viewpoint. What are some of the more common marketing mistakes you see people making, perhaps when they're trying too hard?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll share one of my own mistakes because I'm certainly not perfect. And even as a marketing professional, I think selling yourself and your own business is very different from selling someone else's business. And actually a few of my on the AC webinars that we've done, I've had a lot of coaches who've said to me, you know, I come from a marketing background. Why do I find it so hard to market myself? But it is a very different approach. So one of the mistakes, and I remember a terrible phone conversation early on in my business, and it was with a Dutch hotelier, which for a start was absolutely not my market. So I shouldn't really have even sort of had the conversation. So that was my first learning, was don't say yes to every opportunity. But started the conversation. And I think I let him get in maybe 3 or 4 words in our half an hour conversation because I was so busy telling him all the things I could do for him. And I told him over and over again, over half an hour. And at the end of the call, he said, Well, thanks for that, Kim. But actually, we wanted something completely different. And that was the end of the call. And actually, I probably could have helped with that other thing that they asked for, but I didn't ask any questions. I was so busy pitching, and this is a mistake I see a lot of businesses make, not just coaches. But we're so busy telling people what we can do that we don't stop to ask questions. Marketing really should be a conversation. It's a two-way game. The more we can learn about our clients, the better. What are their pain points? What are they trying to achieve? Are they in the middle of a pandemic? Are they in quick fix mode? Or actually, are they building for the future? And so I see, for example, a lot of coaches on LinkedIn just constantly posting, I can do this, I can offer these block of coaching sessions, me. But actually, when we show interest in our clients' businesses, what are they trying to achieve? How can we help them solve their problems? And we start with you and your, not I and me. Then that conversation shifts, and that's where we start to create a connection. When we start listening, we start asking questions, because great marketing is really founded in an understanding of our market. And the work often I do with my coach clients is to start with your clients, really get to understand them. We do personas, how old are they? What are they like doing at the weekend? How do they, what keeps them up at night? When we understand our clients, then we can tailor our marketing so that it connects. So that's one of the biggest things. And it's, it's not just small businesses that do this, make this mistake. It's really across the board. You see big corporations just wanging on, particularly law firms are really bad at this as well. We do this, we do that, and not really engaging with their audience.
I would like to think that for many coaches listening to this, actually there's an opportunity here to play to their strengths, which is listening, asking questions. So coming back to the theme that we were talking about earlier of being yourself, there's another opportunity here to just do what you're good at and infuse a kind of marketing strategy around that, I suppose.
Completely. Absolutely. Great point there. Yes. You don't have to become someone else when you do your marketing. This isn't about sort of, bringing the warm and fuzzy coach in your sessions and then the sort of ruthless marketeer, egocentric sort of pushiness to your marketing. Absolutely. Use those brilliant the listening skills you have, that curiosity about people. Bring that into your marketing as well. It's great point.
Yeah. You mentioned curiosity there. I'm curious about a couple of things. I'm conscious of your time today, Kim, and I'm really grateful for you sharing your insights and wisdom. One of the things I'm curious about, I know a lot of coaches are very interested in forever improving themselves and their professional game. Continual professional development, I think they call it in the Association for Coaching. I'm curious as to how you constantly improve your game. I know that, well, certainly from my point of view, you strike me as somebody who's always innovating in terms of what you do and how you do it, and I find that really inspirational. But I'm curious, what's going on behind the scenes there? How do you hold yourself accountable, and how do you continually improve your own game, Kim?
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I took on a business coach around 5 years ago who really helped me take that next step in my business and gave me that confidence and the accountability. So I think for me, it's about knowing how you get the most out of yourself. And I don't know if you're familiar with Gretchen Rubin's sort of personality traits. I'm sure your audience are much more sophisticated and have their own better methods, but it's a sort of fun thing. And my personality type is an upholder. So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. So for me, I know that being accountable to someone else is absolutely what motivates me. I will not let anyone else down. So someone else giving me deadlines, that really helps me. And having sort of various advisors as my business grows and changes is great. I mean, like everyone else, I have a big list of podcasts I haven't listened to, a huge stack of books I haven't read, and about 35,000 articles that I have on Pocket or email to myself that I haven't read. So it is always a battle. But for me, it's also about having fun and thinking about what would I enjoy doing with my business. And this is very much linked to putting more personality into my business. So what can I do that actually just brings me lots of joy? And is that a program that I want to put on? Is it about just asking questions? Use my newsletter as a great source of new insights about what people want to learn about. So I love sort of answering specific questions and challenges. That's really fun. How do I engage my creative side? Because I love writing. So I wrote a book this last year all about email. So it's indulging that more playful side of myself as well, not just thinking, oh, it's got to be sort of raw business. So there are lots of different things I do. I also try and be a little bit strict with myself to make sure that I consciously improve the infrastructure of my business too, because that's the side I'm least interested in. I'm much more creative. So surrounding myself with people who can help me do that, whether it's on the finance side or the legal side, or having a really fabulous VA, which I have 2 VAs now who are absolute lifesavers. So it's doing some of the boring stuff as well that ultimately brings me so much pleasure because it's nicely organised.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned joy there, and I certainly enjoy reading your newsletters. They're really interesting, and I find myself laughing in the first couple of sentences. You really do nail things on the head sometimes. You also mentioned, we skimmed it earlier, about your brand new book that's coming out. In fact, the launch is next week as we're recording this, but this will be going out in April, so your book will now be out. Tell us a little bit about the new book and what's next for you, Kim.
Thank you. So yes, my book is called Email Attraction: Get What You Want Every Time You Hit Send. And it's all about how to write business emails, because most of us have been taught how to write essays at school, but we've never been taught how to write a good email. And even before the pandemic, we were emailing for several hours a day, and now it's kind of gone through the roof. So email is heavily relied on to deliver so many things for us, booking meetings with clients and get in front of people, get people to look at our proposals, get invoices paid. And yet we don't often think about how we write these emails. So I wrote a book to address all of that, which was a really fun process, painful at times. But I think it's also a good example, and your audience, hopefully be interested to hear about this, of sort of being yourself in business. I didn't want to write a sort of stodgy business book, because let's face it, email is not the most exciting of topics, or potentially the most exciting of topics. We don't it wasn't like, mummy, when I grow up, I want to write a book about email. But it is something I feel passionate about. So I wanted to write a book that had a serious message, but delivered it in a way that was fun and engaging and funny at times. So I did that with the choice of words that I used, stories, examples, quite a light-hearted approach. I used an illustrator, so there's all sorts of weird and funny illustrations in the book. But as I sort of got nearer to launch, I'm just pre-launch now, but a few weeks ago I had a major wobble, and I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? This book is it's too out there. It's a little bit wacky. It's got this bright yellow cover. How are people going to respond? And even after all these years of putting my personality into my business, I did have this big wobble. So we kind of sent out review copies of the book to lots of different publications, and it turns out that the Financial Times picked it up and wrote the most amazing review of my book. And they compared it to this sort of Bible for business writing that was written by Sir Ernest Gowers in 1948, and really flattering comparison. And it really just could not have been more positive. And it was real validation for me that you can do things in your own way, and you can do things a little bit differently from everyone else. And it can work. In fact, it can be the best thing for you. And if I'd written that book in a sort of stodgy, formal style, it probably would have undermined the message of the book, which was about loosening up and using more informal language, amongst lots of other things. So it was a great lesson to myself to have courage in my convictions, and that personality really does sell. And this is the response has been absolutely amazing to the book so far. I've got a big launch list of people coming next week. So to everyone listening, do be a bit brave, because it can pay off big time.
That's great. Very much looking forward to the read there, Kim. Thank you so much for your time today. You shared lots of wonderful ideas and wisdom, as always. Finally, where can folks best connect with you and find out more about you and your work, Kim?
So if they want to hop on over to my website, it's kimarnold.co.uk, and there you can sign up to my regular emails, the ones that you mentioned, Rob, that make you laugh, hopefully make you think as well. So sign up to those. You'll hear from me each week with hopefully something to make you smile, make you think, and that's really useful for your coaching practice, your brand, your marketing, your communication.
That's great. Yeah, highly recommend the newsletters. Thank you so much for your time today, Kim.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you, Rob.